Danny, how are you? You know,
how you guys doing?
Is the show that you produced, is that Broadway or is that off Broadway?
No, the show I produced is HBO's Deaf Poetry Jam. That's my baby.
Right, but you also were involved with the Broadway show.
I was an executive consultant for the Broadway thing, which we won a Tony for. So
yeah, that was brilliant. I went to see that, and I had laughed 1 second and tears in my eyes another second. It was just truly beautiful.
Yeah, we got this thing touring the country now, so we're getting that same response that you got all over the country, man. It's a wonderful thing to take poetry out of the coffee shops and bring it into the mainstream and have it affect so many people's lives.
Danny, not enough people are really appreciate or know much about poetry. How did you get into that?
My daddy was a poet. So, I mean, he was a writer and a poet besides working for the Board of Education. And when we were kids, he used to read us his poetry, and it just stuck with me. And I have a couple of art galleries here in New York, Rush Arts Gallery. And when I opened Rush Arts Gallery, one of the things I wanted to do was give the poets that would come to the shows a venue to do their stuff. So, during the openings or on special occasions, we would have poetry. And so for the last 10 years, I've been producing little poetry shows here and there in the arts galleries and other places. And so finally a poet said, Danny, why don't you help me take poetry to the next level, so poets can eat. And I said, fine. And so, we got together and came up with the concept of Deaf Poetry Jam based on my brother Russell's Deaf Comedy Jam. And we pretty much spent 2 years building that up, and we sold it to HBO, and then after a couple good years on HBO, we took it to Broadway. So,
yeah, Danny comes from a very talented family. His brother, of course, Russell Simmons, and his other brother. Go ahead, Danny. You tell us a little bit about your family.
Well, my baby brother is Run from the legendary rap group Run D.M.C. He's now the Reverend Run. And, of course, Russell is the founder and president of Def Jam Records and Fat Farm Clothing. He's the businessman in the family, and I guess me and Joey Run are the artists.
Yeah, and also Danny's a fantastically talented painter. Tell us a little bit about this style and what inspires you in your paintings.
Well, my paintings. People have been asking me that for years. What do I do? I'm an abstract painter mostly, and people ask me what I do, and I coined a term to sort of encapsulate everything that it is. It's called Neo-African Abstract Expressionism. I've been very influenced I'm a collector not only of comic books, but I'm a collector of African art and tribal arts from around the world, and I've been influenced by abstract expressionism, which is an American form of painting, and African art. And I've sort of melded those two things together and come up with something that looks like a combination of both of them. So I've been showing that. I just got back from France, actually, a few days ago, where I was involved in an art festival over there with my work. So, that's my main love, comic books.
Danny, tell us a little bit about how you got involved with comic books and what kind of comic books you collect.
Well, I got involved. I was a comic book collector as a little kid. I'm 50 now, but I started reading comic books when I was 6 and 7, and then I went through up into my teens, and I stopped, and then I had a kid, and he started reading comic books, and then he stopped, but I got hooked again.
Hey, Danny, what was your early favorite comics when you were 6, 7, 8, that type of thing? What were you really looking? What'd you go out and buy?
Before Marvel really hit the streets, I was basically, I loved the Flash and Batman, Superman, but when the first Marvels came out, and I have them all now. I wish I would have kept them because I had them all then too. Came out, just the otherness of these characters, the human quality that they put in these superheroes. They had lives, and they were weird. And so, I couldn't get enough of the Hulk. I couldn't get enough of Spider-Man. Couldn't get enough of Fantastic Four. And then they brought on Iron Man. But, I had all of them. And we used to trade comics and collect comics. And so, when I started coming back to comics, I went directly. My favorite comics for a very long time were the X-Men, because there's a relation. Mutants to the rest of the human world has so many parallels for other people in the world that that are not getting a fair shake. So I immediately was X-Men. And so when I started, I had to go back and again, this is where Vincent comes into the story. I had to go back and get all these comics again. And so I have all the Marvel number ones, and that sort of took me into the golden age, and I started looking at those. So I've been collecting now, seriously collecting golden age and early silver age comics for the last maybe 5 or 6 years, and built up a pretty good collection.
Yeah, Danny definitely has quite a collection. What I really enjoy about getting together with him when he comes to visit our showroom here in Manhattan is his enthusiasm about the comic books. Some collectors, I think, have kind of forgotten about what they really loved about it, and it becomes more of an obsession, and more of comic books become somewhat of an attachment in their lives, not so much of something that they really enjoy or love. And it's really wonderful whenever you kind of start getting a little bit discouraged by this constant, how much is it worth, or what is the value of this book, and then you have to eventually you get back to, and from time to time you meet these collectors and customers who genuinely love the comic books and read them and care about the characters and what's going on with them, and that Danny has that. It's something that we really appreciate here.
You know, every Wednesday when comic books come out, I'm in the comic book store in the current store buying my books because I read comic books. You know, as soon as I get a break from something else, I'm sitting down, and my favorite thing is Saturday afternoon. If nobody's bugging me, I'll sit there for a few hours and just read my comic books, man, old ones and new ones alike.
Hey, Danny,
what titles are you reading today?
That's what I was going to ask too.
I'm still an X fan, but they got the Authority, which I really love.
That's great.
And they got the Wildcats have come back. I just got through reading a series called Red, which was really good about a rogue CIA agent who came back. I mean, there's so many comics. I must buy 20 comic books a week, so I buy a lot of titles.
Right, great.
And I read them. But if I had to do it, the X books are still my favorite books.
Yeah, I was about 2 weeks ago, my wife and I rented out X-Men 2, and we watched it on the weekend, and I watched that movie. I had it on DVD. I rented it out, and then I watched the behind-the-scenes DVD that they give you along with the movie, and it was fantastic. I loved seeing the behind-the-scenes, how they made it, what the thought process was going in, especially the interviews with the production designer and how he came up with these incredible sets. When you think about the X-Men, you always think about tolerance of people who are different. You think about prejudice. You think about these types of these aspects of our world, which we are all still grappling with, and then when you see it in this form about mutants versus Homo sapiens, it really puts it in a different context, and you can kind of look at things and say, something. This is just because somebody's skin color is different, or because they speak a different language or a different religion. It really doesn't matter much. We're all human beings here.
Yeah, I think that's why I was so drawn to the X-Men, because they came out right at the height of the civil rights movement. My father was a civil rights activist, and I could just relate to them. They're being persecuted for being mutants.
And much like most of the Marvel characters, I think many of the Marvel characters, Stan Lee and Kirby and Ditko, they tapped into this with us. Everybody's felt like an outsider at one time in their life or another. And if you love Spider-Man for that reason, you love the Hulk for that reason, you love the X-Men for that reason. Everybody's felt like they've been on the outside looking in, no matter how cool you were in school, no matter what type of life of privilege you might have led. Everybody's felt like an outsider. They've felt like they're looking at the world from a different perspective.
That's really true, how comics help us out. And we have about a minute left, guys. And Danny, I wanted to thank you for joining us. But kind of one final question, and maybe you could leave with our listeners. If somebody is interested to get involved in collecting, what would you give them as advice for them to do, like first thing out?
I mean, it depends on what they're trying to collect for. I think if you're going to get involved in collecting, you need to love the books. You need to love comic books. And so they need to read comics. And that'll tell you. And then the way I did it was, then I went back and acquired the things I read as a kid, because they not only nostalgia, but they just meant so much to me. And you have to collect what you like. So once you establish some characters that you like, then you collect those, and then you spread out from there. I think collecting also as an investment is one of the best investments you can possibly make these days, because they manage to keep their value during all kinds of up and down times. But the love of the books is the most important thing for me.
Amen.